An object older than Earth slipped past the outer gravitational reach of Jupiter, and almost nobody talked about it. No emergency briefing, no live public update, no sudden mission announcement, just silence. That is what makes this story so unsettling. Because 3I Atlas is not just another comet drifting music through the solar system. By the time it reached Jupiter, it had already forced astronomers to confront a series of impossible music questions about its age, its chemistry, its trajectory, and the way it behaved near the sun. And yet, at the exact moment when this object threaded one of the music's most extraordinary flybys ever recorded, the institutions with the most data said, music, almost nothing. That silence matters because when an object this old, this strange music, and this precisely placed moves through Jupiter's gravitational frontier, and music keeps going as if it used the giant planet exactly the way a spacecraft would, you stop asking whether music, it is interesting. You start asking why nobody wants to explain it. 3I Atlas is unsettling. Music, for one simple reason. It does not fit comfortably inside the story of an ordinary comet. Its chemistry, music, points to an origin far older than our solar system, possibly dating back to the early Milky Way, which means this object, music, have formed billions of years before Earth even existed. That alone would make it extraordinary. But then the rest of the anomalies begin piling on top of each other. Its isotopic profile looks unlike anything in our music, local cosmic neighborhood. Its material appears linked to environments colder, older, and poorer in heavy elements, music, than the conditions that shape the bodies we normally study. In other words, music, this thing does not just look ancient. It carries the chemical signature of a different era of the galaxy, almost like a fossil from a time when the Milky Way itself was still young and violent. And that is where music, the discomfort begins, because once an object is that old, every other anomaly around it becomes heavier. The strange metals matter more. The preserved organics matter more. The flight path matters more. It stops feeling like an unusual comet and starts, music, feeling like a visitor carrying a history too large for the word comet to contain. By the time 3I Atlas was moving outward, music, toward Jupiter, the list of oddities was already difficult to ignore. The object had shown signs of complex music chemistry, unexpected material behavior, and non-gravitational forces. Music that did not sit neatly inside the usual explanations. Some of those anomalies could be defended individually. Comets can outgas. Comets can rotate strangely. Comets can surprise us. But this is where the story changes. All of those surprises belong, music, to the same object at the same time. Then came Jupiter. On March, music 16th, 2026, 3I Atlas made its closest approach to the giant planet at a distance, so close to Jupiter's gravitational boundary that it effectively brushed the edge of the planet's sphere of influence. That matters because the geometry was extraordinary. Not just close in a casual sense, music, but close in the kind of way orbital dynamicists notice immediately. It passed through the outer fringe of the music region where Jupiter's gravity dominates, and it did not get captured. Instead, music, it kept going, and not only did it keep going, it did so in a way that looks disturbingly familiar. Because when a spacecraft approaches a giant planet, schemes the right region, and exits music with added speed on a clean outbound path, we have a name for that. Music gravity assist. A slingshot. The kind of maneuver humans design on purpose. This is where the whole story starts to feel genuinely uncomfortable. If 3I Atlas had approached Jupiter on a sloppy, chaotic, perturbed path, then maybe the encounter could be dismissed as one more music, lucky cosmic near-miss. But that is not what makes it so haunting. The outbound trajectory remained unervingly precise. That matters because earlier observations had already suggested the presence of non-gravitational forces, music, acting on the object. In plain terms, something about its motion did not always look fully explained by gravity and ordinary outgassing alone. Normally, if an object is music being pushed around by messy asymmetric forces, you expect the path afterward to show that mess. You expect music drift. You expect deviation. You expect the exit to look dirtier than the entrance. But here, the opposite happened. The object passed through Jupiter's gravitational frontier, took the assist, and continued outward on a clean, targeted-looking departure. That is the kind of thing that makes people, music, uneasy because it suggests one of two possibilities. Either nature produced a staggeringly precise chain of coincidences all at once, or the forces acting on the object were not random at all, like a dart thrown through a hurricane that still lands exactly music where it was meant to. The trajectory of 3I Atlas after Jupiter does not feel like the aftermath of chaos. It feels like the completion of a maneuver. And if that is true, then the scariest question is no longer what the object is where it is going now. Under normal music circumstances, an object this anomalous passing this close to Jupiter's gravitational edge would dominate. Music, the scientific conversation. There would be briefings, interviews, urgent public, music, excitement, maybe even open discussions of intercept concepts or fast response mission studies. Because if something this ancient, music this chemically strange, and this dynamically unusual is still within reach, even briefly, you do not simply watch it leave without saying much. And yet, that is exactly what happened. Observations were made, images were captured, instruments were in position, data exists, but the public response has been astonishingly quiet compared to the scale of the event. That silence does not prove music, one specific explanation by itself, but it does something almost as powerful. It forces attention onto the gap between what happened and how little was officially said about it. That gap is what music gives the story its tension, because maybe the silence is bureaucracy, maybe it is caution, maybe it is the slow machinery of institutions that never move at the speed of public curiosity. But there's another possibility too, and that is the one people cannot stop thinking about. The possibility that the full instrument readings, the deeper measurements, the electromagnetic and particle data tell a story far stranger than the released images alone. A photograph, can music be called a comet? A full data profile is much harder to wave away. And when an object like 3I Atlas passes Jupiter, executes the kind of flyby we associate with deliberate music gravitational use, and then disappears outward while agencies stay quiet, the silence stops, music sounding neutral. It starts sounding like part of the event itself. What makes the Jupiter passage feel even more unsettling is that 3I Atlas was already chemically unusual music before it got there. This was not some dull chunk of ice following a predictable path. Its composition, music, had raised eyebrows because it seemed to preserve material from a far older cosmic environment, including signatures, music, that did not sit comfortably with the kinds of bodies we usually catalog in our own solar system. That matters because once an object's chemistry already feels out of place, every precise movement it makes starts to look, music, less innocent. And that is why the Jupiter flyby hits differently. If a normal, music, comet takes a lucky path, scientists call a fascinating natural event. But if an object with music, ancient isotopic anomalies, unusual material composition, and persistent dynamical oddities arrives, music, at Jupiter's gravitational doorstep and exits with apparent precision, the emotional weight changes. It begins to feel less music like nature improvising and more like an object carrying a long history into a very specific music moment, like finding a key that not only looks ancient, but also fits a lock on the first try. The chemistry, music, of 3I Atlas makes its trajectory harder to shrug off as mere coincidence. One of the darkest possibilities in this story is music, that Jupiter was never the point. It may have been the turning point. That distinction matters, music, because it changes how we read the entire encounter. If 3I Atlas were simply wandering through the solar system, Jupiter would be one dramatic stop along a long, chaotic journey. But if the flyby functioned like a gravity assist, then Jupiter was not a place to visit. It was a tool to use. That is exactly the kind of idea that keeps people awake at night. Because once you see Jupiter as a checkpoint rather than a destination, the obvious question becomes unavoidable. What comes next? The outbound path matters more than the inbound mystery. The object did not linger, did not get trapped, did not tumble into confusion. It passed through, took what the giant planet's gravity could offer, and kept going. That is not how we emotionally imagine ancient cosmic relics behaving. It is how we describe directed travel, like a ship stopping only long enough to catch a current before crossing into deeper water. 3i Atlas may have treated Jupiter less like an obstacle and more like a launch music stage. A major reason this story refuses to stay simple is the growing sense that ordinary gravity may not fully explain the object's motion. By itself, that idea is not enough to prove anything dramatic. Comets can be nudged by outgassing, sunlight, rotation, and all kinds of natural music effects. But the problem here is not that one small anomaly appeared. The problem is that these strange forces seem to exist alongside music, a flyby geometry that already looks unusually efficient. That combination is what makes the whole event so uncomfortable. If chaotic, non-gravitational effects were dominating the motion, the post-Jupiter path should feel messier, less elegant, more obviously disturbed. But if the outbound route still preserves a kind of striking precision, then those forces start music to feel less like random disturbance and more like part of the story. Like watching an aircraft move through heavy turbulence and still land exactly music on its assigned runway. The motion of 3i Atlas after Jupiter makes people wonder whether the pushes acting on it were really as uncontrolled as the music seemed. And once that suspicion enters the room, the flyby no longer music feels passive. It starts to feel orchestrated, whether by physics we do not yet understand or something even harder to say out loud. At some point, the silence itself, music, becomes unstable. Because if the data gathered during the Jupiter passage contains music, nothing extraordinary, then eventually the story shrinks back into the category of an unusual but natural interstellar visitor. But if the deeper measurements confirm music's stronger anomalies, unexpected acceleration behavior, unusual material signatures, thermal inconsistencies, or outbound dynamics too precise to music dismiss, then the quiet around this event will not hold forever. It will crack. And when it does, the narrative around 3 music Atlas may change very quickly. That is why this moment feels so tense. We may be living in the narrow window between music, event, and explanation, between observation and disclosure, between the object passing Jupiter and the full meaning of that passage becoming impossible to contain. If that is true, then NASA's silence is not the end of the story. It is the pause before the story becomes much bigger. Like thunder that arrives seconds after the lightning, the public may simply be standing in the delay between what happened out there and what the rest of us are eventually going to hear about it. For most people, 3i Atlas was just another strange music object passing through the solar system. A brief headline, a distant curiosity, music, something to glance at and move on from. But that story, music, becomes much harder to believe once you look at the full picture. An object with ancient chemistry, unsettling isotopic, music, signatures, unexplained dynamical behavior, and a flyby of Jupiter that looked far too efficient to ignore, followed by silence from the very institutions watching it most closely. That is not the kind of combination people forget, because maybe the real reason this music event feels so heavy is that Jupiter did not look like the end of 3i Atlas's story. It looked like the turning point. The moment when a mysterious interstellar object approached the largest planet in our system, skimmed its gravitational music frontier, took the kind of boost we normally associate with deliberate mission design, and then disappeared outward while the public was given very little to work with. That is what makes music the silence so loud. It leaves room for a possibility that is difficult to shake, that the most important part of this event is not what 3i Atlas was, but what it did after Jupiter. And maybe that is the most unsettling part of all. If this object really is as ancient, as chemically unusual music, and as dynamically strange as it appears, then we may not have just witnessed a rare interstellar visitor. We may have witnessed a music passage event that will only make sense in hindsight once the deeper measurements, the full trajectory analysis, and the hidden details begin to surface. Like watching a door close before realizing music, something important just passed through it. Humanity may only understand the meaning of this flyby after 3I Atlas is already too far away to reach. So now the question is no, music, longer weather 3I Atlas passed Jupiter. The question is this: why did it pass Jupiter that way? And what is it heading toward now? If you enjoyed this video, drop your theory in the comments below. Do you think NASA stayed silent because this was just a rare, natural flyby, music, or because the deeper data tells a much stranger story? And subscribe, because if Music 3I Atlas really used Jupiter the way it appears to have, then this may only be the beginning of a music much bigger mystery. I'd love to hear what you think about this, so drop a comment below. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please share this video and subscribe to help the channel grow. Every bit of support counts.